everybody, Magpie here, and okay, so I have thoughts, so many thoughts about this episode, so I suppose I better start with a disclaimer. Okay, so you guys know I love the anime, and on the whole, I really appreciate it. I appreciate what the creators have been doing this season, including how they're adding some extra scenes and point of views which we never get to see in the light novel, since outside of the extra short stories, we're always stuck in Myne's point of view. That said, most of my impressions in this video are actually focused on stuff that was different or left out of the anime, because in the end my impressions are obviously going to come from that kind of perspective, that of a light novel. So you've been warned. In case I come across as nitpicky, I'm sorry, and I hope that you all understand, especially anime only, so once you read the light novel you'll definitely understand. Okay, so let's start. That recap. That was almost 2 minutes of stuff they definitely could have cut out in favor of more content. However, at least we got to see what happened in the temple. I like those extra scenes where they showed us where Gunther made it to the gate and Fran told him that Myne and Damiel had gone already. And I also like how Fran is able to see the rot from the temple and he rushes off to tell Ferdinand about it. Now, back to the alleyway, Myne and Thule get kidnapped and Gunther appears. When I saw Otto just standing there stupidly watching the girls be kidnapped, I wanted to scream. Like, what the heck, Otto? Even Lutz and Gale are on it and they're chasing after the bad guys. How stupid are they making you seem in this anime? I suppose we could justify his inaction by the fact that a soldier he might be by profession, but Otto is in reality someone who deals with paperwork on a day-to-day basis, so his fighting instincts are minimal, and like many people, he freezes in a crisis and stares stupidly as things happen, while his brain is trying to catch up. So when Gunther finally catches the bad guy, Myne is sent flying, and we also see that Thule's captor is holding our sweet angel hostage, which causes Myne to go into crushing mode. The light novel says that Myne has had a year's practice using her mana, so she can now target her opponents. Whereas before, when she crushed the High Bishop, her mana would attack anybody within her eyesight. That is why she's able to attack the kidnapper, while Thule remained unscathed. Now, thanks to Myne's crushing, Gunther is able to bring down the bad guy that was holding Thule's hostage, but I feel that everything here is just a little sloppy. Okay, so there were two guys. Yes, one went down with a knife in his arm. Another one is in Gunther's arms, looking like he passed out. Gunther releases this guy. Yet in the blink of an eye, this same guy is now on his feet and is about to do a mana attack. How in the heck did this happen? There's just so many pairs of eyes around. Did no one see this? And also, it's a 3 against 2 battle. At least it should be, right? Oh wait, never mind. There's only 2 of them because Otto hasn't caught up to them yet. Oh my gosh, how slow of a reaction time does Otto have? I refuse to believe that he's a slow runner, but anyway, in that case, Gunther, why did he leave the most vulnerable one? The one that they are actually after in the care of this one poorly trained, unfit, slower than molasses reflex time paper pusher of a soldier. I'm sorry, I just have to laugh because this was just so weird. Yes, this is in the light novel. Gunther did carry Thule and left Myne to Otto, but Otto comes across as better at his job than he does here. However, I thought it was super cool how Damiel stepped in to protect Gunther with his shield when one of the devouring soldiers did a mana attack. Notice that he is able to counter this mana blast. Devouring soldiers are usually at around lay noble levels, so Damiel, who is a trained knight, can easily deal with 1 or 2 of these. So there's dialogue about Myne bleeding here that doesn't actually fit the urgency of the situation. It kind of brings down the tension and just the urgency itself. In the light novel, Otto immediately carries Myne, and as they are racing through the flood of people in the main street, Otto is the one that tells her, hey, you're bleeding. Regardless, Myne stamps it and they make their way to the temple. I do understand the choice I made here though. Animating this while they were running would have been super difficult. So they rush off, leaving Damiel, probably fighting in the street with the other soldiers, but honestly, who knows? Because there's no trace of the fight as they run off. And now your long-awaited Arno hate segment. This horrible little sneak tells Fran that Ferdinand is not in. Liar! Ferdinand is in his hidden room. Not only that, but he lies to Fran and says that he has no idea where Ferdinand is when he knows for sure that Ferdinand is in his room, and he would certainly have sprung to action if he were to pass on the message from Fran. Anime onlys, can you begin to understand why we hate him so much? Because if it hadn't been for Arno failing to pass on the message at that time, Myne would never have had to face evil Santa and Fat Toad by herself, and been forced to leave her family behind. So yeah, we hate Arno. Next, there's another extra scene that's not in the light novel. Delia approaches Fran and says that the bishop and his guest want to meet Myne. Stupid Delia. Okay, fine. I know you don't mean any harm and that you've been blinded, but you little punk, what trouble you've caused everyone. Fran must be so frustrated here, but he's just thankful that Myne is not in the temple so that the bishop can't use his authority to force her to meet his guest. But Myne is actually back in the temple, so they all gather in Myne's chambers. Myne has changed into her robes, and so has Gil. In fact, everyone has changed. Even Damiel. Damiel certainly did. He's now looking really sharp in his noble attire from having gone to the Knight's Order, and says that Ferdinand wasn't in, and he was not able to get in touch with him either via ordinance. They decide to go to Ferdinand's office again. In the light novel, they say that they will interrogate Arno about it, which is a drastic measure but a necessary one. Damiel gives her a ring, which is actually evidence since it has a noble's crest in it. And while it is important for them to persecute their assailants, Myne needs something to defend herself with in case something happens. The light novel describes it as a ring with a small, slightly murky gem attached to it. Damiel asks Myne if she can pour mana into it, and Myne replies that yeah, she can, but just barely. Damiel warns her that because it is a low-quality stone, it might shatter if she puts too much mana into it, which is an important detail. Though, given the way that she used it when fighting Count Toad, I guess that's a detail that's moot now. So, yeah. They leave Gil behind in the chambers, and I thought it's so precious and adorable how he prayed over Myne as they left. The light novel says that the shock of seeing someone killed in a spray of blood had gotten to him because yes, people, the anime really keeps the fight sequences really clean, like really kid-friendly here. In reality, when Gunther rescued Tuli from her attacker, there was blood and gore that sprayed into Tuli's face. And apparently Gil was shocked at seeing a man be killed in front of him. And honestly, I would also be in shock. Now, I really like the scene with Dirk's submission contract. As much as I loathe seeing these baddies, I find their details really neat, from the contract signing to Dirk getting his own little ring, and the conspiratorial looks that the baddies give each other. But Dirk, poor baby Dirk, they just force you to sign your life away. Ah, Delia. Meanwhile, Myne's people walk through various passages in the temple, with Fran being the MVP as he steers them clear from danger. Now, in the light novel, when they spot their enemies, that is Evil Santa, Count Toad, and their various servants, Myne asks, "Hey, who are these people?" And Damiel identifies Count Toad and says that they will need the Knight's Order or just Ferdinand, because even though Damiel is a knight, he doesn't stand a chance against Count Bindewald, not only because he is of a much higher status, but he also has much more mana. When they do bump into them at last, I like how they kept the detail from the light novel in how Myne turned away in disgust. Count Toad's gaze sent goosebumps all over her body, and she clung closer to her daddy. Now, let's talk about Delia being confused about the contract that Dirk signed. In the anime, it shows a second page that she hadn't seen. It is an interesting choice, and I get it, but the light novel is a bit different. The Count pulls out the contract. It wasn't in Delia's possession. It looks like a proper adoption contract, but across its title, one could see that there were 2 layers of parchment. He peeled off the front layer to reveal the text beneath: Submission Contract for a Devouring Child. Then, Count Toad tells his soldiers to attack Myne and her people. And I just couldn't help but laugh when Count Toad's baddies appeared doing the Naruto run. But soon I was distracted by the way that they buffed up, like right in front of our eyes. And actually I was really surprised. I had not expected to see body enhancements in this part of the story. That's super wild. The light novel has Gunther and Fran take on 1 soldier and Damiel take the other 2. The Count's personal soldiers weren't as capable as Damiel, a formerly trained knight. It took them longer to build up mana for simple attacks, and they weren't able to fight as well as him. But taking on 2 people at once was still difficult, and Damiel was just barely managing. Meanwhile, Gunther and Fran were fighting with the other one. They would have been able to take him down, except that they didn't have defense against his mana attacks. When Bindewald begins his own attacks, aiming to eradicate Damiel once and for all, Myne steps in and launches an attack of her own to block Bindewald's. If one ignores the light novel detail that Myne couldn't send attacks as strong as those, and was merely sending weaker ones to make Bindewald's attacks go off course, this was actually really cool. Seeing our gremlin being able to stand against the attacks of a fully grown archnoble is really impressive, and I'm so proud for her. Now, something they skipped here is how Bindewald, when he sees that she's wearing his devouring soldier's ring, he laughs and says, "Hey, I've won." The rings are given to those with the devouring, which, once worn, make them unable to attack their master, and they can't be removed until their master voids their contract. The rings were made so that the master could pour his own mana into them to inflict pain on any slave who disobeyed him. In the light novel, Count Bindewald says, "Obey me if you don't want to suffer," but Myne took off the ring right before his eyes and said, "Just saying, it comes right off." Ha ha. The High Bishop feels the need to get involved, for whatever reason, and he uses Dirk to make his own attack. But Dirk doesn't have much mana, so he uses him as a human shield when he drains him completely of it, and Delia begs Myne to not harm Dirk, forcing Myne to stand down. Darn it, why, it makes no sense. She's able to crush one dude while he held Thule, so why not attack the bishop here if she can so clearly target her attack and only harm one person? Well, inconsistency here. So since everyone else is distracted fighting, Jenny sneaks around and grabs Myne. And I hated this part, man. Jenny, I knew you were jealous of Wilma and Rosina, and I know you live a horrible life, but it ain't their fault. It's not Myne's fault either that you ended up with Evil Santa. And it's despicable how you wish your same horrible fate of abuse and slavery on someone who never did you any harm, and a small child too. Thankfully, Gunther comes in before she signs the contract and rescues Myne. The light novel has it so that he kicks Jenny from behind as hard as he can, and the force sent everyone flying toward Bindewald. Myne ended up on the floor, sandwiched between the Count Toad and Jenny, and here's another instance where the anime keeps things nice and kid-friendly. Gunther pulled Myne out from the pile of bodies, and then pulled Jenny up with his free arm and kicked her in her stomach, making her throw up all over the place. And I personally like to imagine that she threw up on Bindewald. That would have been just perfect. Now, when Myne begins to crush the High Bishop, and he pulls out the Darkness Face Stone, it was really cool to see the mana go into it. I love this part. The fact that she was able to totally destroy a Darkness Face Stone is crazy. It's no small feat to saturate a Darkness Face Stone with so much mana. I just wish that they would have been faithful to the light novel and had it turn to gold dust. Now, look at this scene. Gunther is being a baby with his cut arm, and Damiel is just standing by. Just know that during this time in the light novel, Damiel is fighting off Bindewald's attacks, like by himself, and it is while they're fighting that Damiel is hit as well. In the light novel, Gunther's injury is actually very serious. It's not just a little cut. His whole arm is basically burnt and he is debilitated by it. Yet he manages to take care of the last of the soldiers by slamming the soldier's head into the ground like he was dunking a basketball. Again, this is too much for children, so they skipped it. And when Damiel is at last hit by Bindewald, he is rendered totally unconscious. So now it is down to the main players, Little Myne versus Bindewald to the death. And that is when Ferdinand shows up. And oh my gosh, it felt so good to see him step in here. Yeah, I was thrilled. It was perfect. Did you all hear the music? It is sublime. I loved it. It is so regal and so fitting for the situation and just for him in general. He asks for Bindewald's permit to be in the city, and I just loved it when he supposedly reminds the High Bishop about the new rules that were implemented during the Winter Social. And he basically puts him in his place, reminding him in front of his evil buddy that he is not a proper noble. When Ferdinand tells her that because she attacked a noble, she, her attendants, and her family is to be sentenced to death. She apologizes to Gunther, and man, this scene. Gunther is best dad, but it's just so sad how he just accepts his fate. It's a terrible and cruel world that they live in, where as commoners they have no right to attack another noble. In the light novel, Ferdinand looks disappointed and angry at what things have come to. He chastises her, telling her that she should have just gone all out and erased everyone, so there would be no evidence, and so she wouldn't get into trouble. I love this about Ferdinand. He's so cold, but they skipped it. But since she didn't do that, now she's in trouble and she's gonna have to die. I love how she accepts it, she doesn't cry or complain or beg. But she does look at the charm that Sylvester gave her and calls Sylvester a liar since he didn't come to save her. And I just have to say, thank goodness she showed the charm, because it literally saves her life and that of the others, putting justice on her side. The thing is, she'll have to be adopted by Sylvester immediately, not 2 years from now. Gunther is like, no, Myne, you can't leave us, but she says, this is the only way, Dad, and I really teared up here. I love how the sad music we got in season 2 when she revisits her old world and how she has an emotional moment with her mom is used here to emphasize the fact that once again she'll lose her family just as she did when she first died. Myne is left with an impossible choice here. The part where she smiles at her dad and removes his hand from her wrist before saying she'll do whatever it takes to save them hit me really hard. Oh, poor Gunther, his face just shows the heartbreak that he's feeling at the thought that he's about to lose his little girl. Heck, even Ferdinand looks like he wants to cry. Thanks to the web novel, where we will revisit this incident from his point of view, I know for a fact how he was feeling here. And if you think he feels regret at having to separate Myne from her family, you'd be very, very correct. He feels bitterly regretful. The one thing I would have liked is for Ferdinand to have had this conversation almost in whispers and kneeling down to her level. And so he takes on the job of dealing with the baddies. And I just love the smile. Yes, this is the kind of smile I want to see. This is the kind of smile I know and I love. My Ferdinand is back. He ties up Vesevans with bands of light and challenges Bindewald to a duel, while Myne prays behind him and forms a shield. The shield is different from the one she made in the Spring Prayer. It should really have been the exact same one that we saw in episode 4, but I don't mind because it's just so beautiful. I love that Shizuria overlay. It's as if the goddess herself is protecting them. And oddly enough, Delia seems to have somehow teleported to her side of the room, whereas before she was on the bishop's side. And that's a detail that I really want to call out. I'm actually disappointed in this part. The shield works in such a way that all things and all people who have ill intent against Myne and her people are blasted away and they just cannot get through. As Ferdinand and the Toad are preparing their magic wands for battle, sparks fly, literally, cutting people in the process and weighing them down with their oppressive power that is being generated. It's basically really scary outside, and anybody not protected is going to die in that battle. So Delia begs for Myne to spare Dirk. Myne is truly upset at Delia, but remembers the promise she made to Delia earlier to save her if she's ever in trouble, and says, okay, fine, if you or any of the others can make it inside the shield, then come in. But I'm not gonna move my shield, I'm focused here. Delia and Dirk make it in, as did another attendant or two of the High Bishop. Jenny also tries to get in, but she's blown away. And it's actually a huge omission in my opinion, especially since it helped to establish that Delia really truly never meant to harm Myne when she returned to the High Bishop, and I think it's important for her characterization. And so Ferdinand, looking really fine here, faces off Bindewald. The mana hits the walls and the statues. In the light novel it says that the walls just absorbed it and there was no visible damage, but as a visual effect it's pretty neat. I also liked how the shield keeps the mana blasts from Myne and from her friends. And we end with another cliffhanger. I can't believe they finished it there. I thought for certain that we'd get an important reveal take place, but it seems that we'll have to wait until next week. We get the ending song, and then we get the chibi scene, which was Myne asking Ferdinand why he didn't show up in the first place. And he explains that, hey, ordinances don't reach his hidden room, and it wasn't until another of his attendants, Zam, who doesn't suck, and who isn't a vile snake like Arno, sent him a magic message from the guard at the north gate. Myne is confused about that magic message, and so am I, honestly. This was all new to me. As far as I knew, from what I've read in the light novel, he just came out of his office, like at some random moment for some random reason, but he was genuinely shocked at what was going on outside. There was no indication in the light novel that a message had gotten through to him. So I guess this helps fill in some gaps for us light novel readers. We will see Zam in future volumes. I'm just so glad that he's a nice guy and that he came in clutch, because I don't think Myne would have been able to stand up to Bindewald without a ring on her to blast him. And finally, the final illustration. I usually don't talk about these, but man, this one is so gorgeous. Look at those eyes. I am in love with Myne and Ferdinand. They both look so striking and dangerous. Do not mess with these two, otherwise this will be the last thing you'll see before Ferdinand turns you to dust. And that is the end of my impressions. Overall, despite my nitpicking, I liked this episode. It was good, it was action-packed. Still, I urge you, if you haven't read the light novels, please check them out. These chapters are just so high stakes that it is literally impossible to put the book down once you start. The anime didn't cut out important things, so I will give it that, but the pacing felt a little off at times. It somehow rushed things, but at the same time it just felt like it lagged at some parts. It's weird, and I'm still trying to understand how, despite so many action scenes, it felt like this episode should have been able to cover more content. However, in the end, if I watch the anime on its own without thinking of comparing it to the source material, it is very, very enjoyable. So, those are all my thoughts. What did you think about this episode? What were your thoughts, and what do you think is going to happen in the next one? Now, light novel readers, remember to hide your spoilers. Thank you for being good sports about it so far. I look forward to reading every one of your comments. And finally, a huge thanks to all my supporters and my Ko-fi members whose support makes these videos possible. And I hope to see you all in the next episode, which is sadly our last one, and it is titled Blessing. It is going to be good. Thank you all. I love you. And until the next time, bye bye.